Welcome to this podcast created by Newcastle University Business School, or NUBS for short. The Oxford Dictionary states that the nub of something is the central or essential point of a situation or problem. So we hope that in this series we can help you to get to the nubs of it. This podcast series looks at a key theme of value, the value of our creative economy, the value of our student experience, the value of our research, the value of our collaborative networks. In this series, you will meet academics, alumni, students, graduates, and professional staff of Newcastle University Business School as they talk about what value means to them. In this episode, join recent graduates Ashley King and Denise Jones as they talk about their student experience and the role of kindness in leadership. Hello everyone, I am here today with the fabulous Denise Jones, who is a wonderful woman and also, like myself, an alumna of our Newcastle University Business School MBA program. And we're going to be having a special conversation between the two of us to talk about kindness in leadership. So hi Denise.
Hi, thank you for having me, Ash.
So before we even get launched into our topic, can you just tell us who you are, a bit about yourself, your background? Who is Denise Jones?
Yeah, of course I can. I'm a mother, first and foremost, of 3 children. I have 2 daughters and a son. And I've lived in the northeast all my life. So brought up here south of the river, I have to say, but moved north of the river. And have graduated and studied in 3 of the universities in the area, in the region. So I feel that I like to feel that I know the area well, have moved around a little bit and also studied a little bit across the different universities. I've been a politician locally as well, so I've got interest in politics, which stems from, various topics of interest that I've had over the years. And obviously I have a vested interest in the region because I live here still and obviously my family are all here and my children are here. But also, I'm very passionate about the region. I've kind of never really wanted to venture far, but care about many people locally and around the world. So that's a little bit about me.
And we have quite a few things in common. One, that we live very close in terms of our houses. I'm in Heaton, you're in Jasmine. But the other thing is, social justice, societal matters, lots and lots of like-minded interests. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you about first is actually in terms of your views or your interest in, you've mentioned politics and society and social justice and societal matters. How did you get started or interested in that?
Yeah, obviously for me, it started with theory because I actually studied politics at college actually initially, and then went on to study at the university in politics in Sunderland, which I did part-time actually. And it fit well with me because I've never been somebody that really conforms generally. I've always felt I could challenge a particular idea or something or a belief of somebody's if it didn't seem to be right to me. So, to go to university and study politics was really natural because it obviously, involves debate and discussion. And I found that really fascinating and interesting because I don't think people realise quite how politics influences every day and in their lives, really, and how involved even local politicians are basically in making decisions around their lives. So, it's been quite a journey actually over the last 20 years, really study and understanding politics and then being involved in politics and seeing it play out from the theory. So it really was triggered by an interest around neurodiverse groups and individuals with autism and having a passion for trying to make a difference for those individuals and the families, really. Being involved in that really gave me a different perspective on life. I think I've always been very caring, but naturally it kind of fit with a lot of also my studies and the kind of character that I am really, and the values and beliefs I hold. So yeah, really interesting.
I like that. And as well, neurodiversity is of great interest to me and myself, having a neurodiversity. But one of the questions I had for you is, you've done a lot of work in politics, but also in healthcare, in making things more equal for communities and societies, for advocating on behalf of communities. And I'm curious that particularly with neurodivergence or those types of challenges, would you say that some of those communities can be invisible? So actually campaigning for them is really important because their voice might not always be heard?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was very, very key for me. I think, I have a family member who has autism actually, and that was the trigger really for getting involved actually in politics. And one of the things I felt was that their voices weren't heard, unfortunately. And I think, it can be quite challenging at times. Obviously, there's a spectrum of need and particularly with children, there is the Autism Act 2009, but, children aren't included in that. So services and provision and, even diagnosis and the path to that's very difficult. So, recognising that and realising the challenge that comes with that for families who are actually trying to maintain a daily life and have some sort of order is very difficult. And then to take on further challenges and to speak up on behalf was the thing that I felt was natural to me. So getting involved in the charity was the first step, and then obviously then making a play towards politics was the next step, really trying to influence where possible you can, locally, and then hopefully, further. So I think, I don't think really quite appreciate, some difficulties that people live with every day with those challenges, particularly those on the spectrum who are more needy, and are obviously reliant on other humans to look after them and take care of them. It isn't all plain sailing. These individuals sometimes don't have any time to themselves all day. And I think that you don't really realise that until you tap into that or you maybe experience that. And you start to speak to individuals and you can't really let it go when you realise that you can actually do something about it. So it's a passion, really.
Absolutely. I would like to ask you a little bit about the topic we're talking about today, which is kindness and leadership, which sounds in some ways a very natural thing to have those words together, and in other ways a bit of a contradiction. So I'm curious for you, what does kindness and leadership mean, that theme to you?
Yeah, kindness and leadership for me is about creating an environment, I think, that nurtures compassion and understanding for others. I think if you actually are an others person, but you can actually recognise that compassion for others and yourself go hand in hand, then I think that's a very important reflective practice to have. And I think if you can tap into that, then you can only ever do good. And I think creating those environments and cultures, not only in the home, but in the wider workplace, will make a difference that add up. And obviously that extends to across the globe, within your own country, within your own communities. And I think that just kind of ties back to what we were just talking about there in terms of particular topic areas. But if we just consider people centric to everything, it's a good starting point.
Absolutely. And your own leadership journey. So we were fortunate to do an MBA together, which was wonderful. And it was, we say this all the time, but it was an absolute opportunity of a lifetime. Also because we were both fortunate to have a scholarship, so partial scholarship to help fund that.
Yes.
And I can't actually remember your reasoning for your scholarship. For me, it was contribution to regional impact. Was yours similar?
I believe mine was on business excellence.
Okay.
So business excellence, I understand. Yeah.
So you did the business excellence one. For me, it was contribution to local and regional impact, which is great.
We're globally connected. The Business School alumni community spans 5 continents and 142 countries.
So what we have now is a duty of care to our communities, to our social networks, and to our region in the northeast of England and the rest of the world, our alumni network, to actually take our learning and go and make the world a better place.
Absolutely.
One of the questions I have then is, sometimes we are in leadership positions, and that's great, but sometimes we can lead from wherever we are. And so what I would like to know from you is, can anybody lead? Can you lead? How can you lead in an organization?
Yes, that's really interesting, because obviously that stems from some of the work I've done. Obviously, you know, I've not been the actual, chief executive of an organization, and I haven't been, the leader of a council or whatever. But I have had obviously significant roles in organizations, leading change and transformation, and rolling out services or one thing or another. And I think you can lead in different capacities within an organisation. I think it really boils down to people buying into people, actually, if I was being honest. And I think that obviously technical skills involved as well. And, an element of obviously responsibility and ownership of what you do. But I do think that you can lead from any level. And actually that can be a small change in leading, an aspect of work on charity, for example, in the workplace, to going out and doing something in the local community, but also within the work environment as well, and building a momentum. And that comes from building relationships, and that comes from trust, and individuals knowing that they can work with you and they can rely on you to do what you said, or that you will support them in the right and nurture them in the right environment. And when the time comes that they have to step up to help, they will do that. I find that if they're considered to be valued, then they will follow, and I believe that can be from any level.
So can kindness and leadership only work in areas or communities or organizations where transformational change is valued, or can it ever work in a transactional environment?
No, I think it can work in a transactional environment as well. I think, organisations are often transacting on with other organisations, business to business, and those other things as well. And I think it's about really kind of focusing on measurement of what adds value to people's lives. And I think that's probably what's been missing, over the last, 40 or more years, actually, and in terms of the economic environments that we all are moving in, and, markets and globalization and that sort of thing. And I think that we're seeing that now, and the results are coming out, and we're now having to make a change and a shift, in that kind of capacity towards really caring about individuals again, and not measuring just money. And that's very valuable in the lessons going forward for any leader. I think that, they have to use people as the centric measure, and then anything else thereafter. And it boils down to, values and beliefs of individuals and what they feel is most important. And most of us have got family members. We don't exist without that. So, we have to think about, the future generations, even if you haven't got children, but their existence and how the world will look for them, and, animals and the planet, really. And we need to take responsibility for that. So I think, we've all got a duty of care for that. Definitely.
Absolutely. I want to ask a question about kindness, about when you are a leader who believes kindness is the most important thing to them. And I say this because I know it's one of your personal favorite values, and one of the things you do in everything you do in your life. But does that mean that you are a soft leader? Does that mean you aren't assertive? What is that like for you in a boardroom?
Yeah, no, I think you can be both. I think you have to have teeth. But I think that people recognise that the general persona that you have, and the character and the approach that you take kind of determines who they are and when they take you seriously or not. And really, I think that means that when you are actually very, very serious about driving something forward, you can show that in the boardroom, and you see results as a result of that. I think that, there's evidence and there's research that backs up what, if you consider people and you value them in within a culture and an organisational workplace, that, you perform better. So if you're measuring your people in what they say and care about, then you're only going to be successful, aren't you? So I think that definitely you can be compassionate, you can be kind, and people will still deliver for you in the boardroom. And I think it's about tone and the way that you deliver the messages often enough, you know.
Or even recognizing people receive messages in different ways.
Yes.
And I think that's probably one of the biggest takeaways for me from our own MBA experience, is that the group work, the opportunities we had to work in very pressurized environments to connect and create. And, you know, we actually did learn to sometimes share our message with kindness or with more assertiveness, but in a totally different way to maybe what we'd ever thought we would need to.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, that was part of the journey as well, wasn't it? It was really looking at how you manage those situations and how you might have traditionally managed them and how you might have to flex in a different environment, which was completely unique, obviously, being in a classroom, but with people who were respected from different cultures and, you know, who had different beliefs, but still being able to deliver together. And, you know, I think a lot of that was bonds that were created in trust and people getting to know each other as well. And I think that was just the most wonderful part of the whole course, really. And really recognising that people are human first and all those other things are very important, you know, to people, and recognising those like culture and religion and those sorts of things. But being able to nurture that sort of sense of responsibility and it was a wonderful experience, wasn't it, at the end of the day, and a lot of self-reflection.
It was. And I would like to know, what is the number one thing, or maybe there's two that you want to share, but what have you learned about yourself as a result of doing your MBA and that inner reflection and that experience? What has it brought about for you?
Yeah, I think it's kind of validated really that I have to fulfill a life of purpose. I think I've realised that's come through in most of my life and through various milestones and things that have happened that have triggered me into different directions throughout life. And I think that's just kind of the MBA validated that needs to continue, if not even faster pace, if that makes sense. Making an impact's really what it's all about for me. And people at the centre and the heart of that are really, really key. And I think really the other takeaway would be tolerant and really consider people as humans first, regardless of where they come from. And remember that we all bleed and we all need feeding, and greed isn't the way forward. And actually people are key. And hopefully people who are leading in the future, who've come out of this university course, will consider that and others, because we had such a great time. But there is a seriousness about it. You know, there is an element of you being there to go out and change the world beyond that. And whilst it's a unique period, there is a realisation when you leave that this now you need to step up and do the acting, which is fundamental to any change, really.
And it's, you know, it's a message we heard a lot in our program, but challenge today and change tomorrow. And we can do that together as communities, as groups, as leaders, through kindness and through respect. We can work with others. Okay, there's just one question I want to ask, and I'm really excited to ask you, but what is the one word you would use to describe what Newcastle University Business School means to you and why?
Oh, gosh, that's tough. That is tough for somebody like me who likes lots of words. I think value, and value because there are so many ways that you can value life, things, people, surroundings, the world. It nurtures what's the right word beyond that? It nurtures the challenge of what you consider value is. And that's what people need to consider going forward, I think, in the world, in business, in leadership, in yourself, and in others. And when you can do that, then I think you're on the right track.
Perfect. Thank you so much for coming in today, Denise. I'm excited about you and your future after your MBA, and to see you emerge into the leader that you are wanting to be. And thank you so much for coming in today.
And thank you very much for having me. I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. We'd love to hear your feedback. You can drop us a line at nubspodcast@newcastle.ac.uk. And you can also tag us in any of our Newcastle University Business School social media channels. You can find these links in our show notes. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share with your friends. This podcast has been brought to you by Newcastle University Business School. Your host has been Ashley King, with executive production by Ashley King, photography by Paul Scurra of That Branding Company and Blind Sea Photo, production by Alice Smith and Tim Lazinski at TL Multimedia Limited.